So, whenever a company puts the word mini in their product name, like the iPad mini or the long gone iPhone mini, it usually means a mini size version or a lower spec version compared to the bigger siblings. But the Sonos Sub Mini though, while it is smaller in size compared to the Sonos Sub, but it is big in sound. So here's my review after using this after a month. So the unboxing experience was very Sonos-like, where as usual there's a tab to open the box seal. Opening the box, firstly there's a smaller box which has the user manual, the product info leaflet and a 3-pin plug. Then there's the Sonos Sub Mini. Once again, in the usual Sonos fashion, it is covered with a white color cloth. Now, if you clicked on this video by mistake or you're just curious on what exactly the Sonos Sub Mini is, well, I'm glad you're here because it is a subwoofer that is built to accompany other Sonos speaker systems. Now, while I've already have the Sonos Sub Gen 3, which I absolutely loved, but for me, I felt it was a little pricey for me to fork out to get another one for myself. Hence, I decided to get myself this Sub Mini instead. So, if you have something like the Sonos 5, the Sonos Ray Beam 1 or the 1SL, then the Sonos Sub Mini would be the perfect addition to your home entertainment setup. And speaking of which, here are the list of all the products that the Sub Mini is compatible with. So feel free to pause this video if you want to see it, especially if you have the older Sonos speakers. Then another very Sonos-like thing that was done on the Sub Mini is the sleek, compact and minimalist design, where it had just the Sonos logo on top, an Ethernet port and the power input underneath. Then finally there's the pairing button at the back, and that's it. Overall, it is very well built and it measures about 23 centimeters wide and 30.5 centimeters tall and weighs at 6.35 kgs. Then it comes with a nice matte look, either in white, which is the correct color, where the center tunnel in the middle is black, as you guys can see, which gives it a classy two-tone look, and there's also an all-black color version as well. Now essentially there are two woofers facing inward, which is an acoustically sealed cabinet structure which neutralizes distortion and improves the bass response and extension as well, which I'll go into later when it comes to the performance and of course the overall sound test of the Sonos Sub Mini. There's also a force cancelling effect to reduce the floor rumble, and even if you put something like a coin or even your ring while the music is playing, it won't vibrate at all. So the Sonos Sub Mini has a dual Wi-Fi connection of either 5 GHz and 2.4 GHz support, and if you prefer a cable connection, that's where you can just plug in into the Ethernet port underneath as mentioned earlier. Now, being a wireless speaker, there's a huge flexibility on where exactly you want to place it, but of course you would definitely want to put it near the soundbar or perhaps to where exactly you're sitting, because if it was on another room, that wouldn't make sense, right? And for your spec nerds out there, the Sonos Sub Mini's woofer drivers are 6 inches and is designed to reach below 25 Hz. Now, setting up the Sub Mini was a piece of cake. Not literally, although it does look like a wedding cake, right? So after plugging in the power cord, open the Sonos app, which will prompt you to set up a new device, and you'll be asked to hold your smartphone near the top of the Sub Mini to transfer your Wi-Fi and your other Sonos detail over via NFC. And in the last step, the app will ask you which existing soundbar or speaker that you would like to pair the Sub Mini with. And by the way, the Sonos Sub Mini does not work with other Sonos portable speakers like the Sonos Roam or the Sonos Move. And if you're like me who has the Sonos Sub Gen 3, you cannot pair the Sub Mini to that or even pair two Sonos Sub Minis like how you can do it with the Sub Gen 3. So keep that in mind. So depending on which speakers that you have got connected to, the majority of the low frequencies will be offloaded to the Sonos Sub Mini, while your original audio device will handle most of the mids and the treble. Then as with other Sonos speakers, it is best to tune your setup with the help of the Sonos TruePlay feature, which unfortunately is not available for Android users, where it is exclusively available for iOS or even if you're using an iPad up until now. Then speaking of the app, since it's just a sub speaker, there's not much to be done in there aside from toggling it off the sub or adjusting the sub levels between -15 to +15, and based on my daily usage, I found the settings of -4 being the sweet spot of most media, including movies as well. Now, during my 1 month of use, I did not experience any playback issues or any connectivity dropouts throughout the review, which was a very good sign. So, does this deliver on its big bass promise? Well, compared to the non-sub Sonos speaker setup, I would say for sure. Now, the Sonos Sub Mini adds a range and dynamics to the overall sound, and certainly some welcome thump in music and movies as well. Movies like Baby Driver, The Joker and Glass Onion sounded so much fuller and were more enjoyable overall when I tested them on the Sonos Ray and also the Sonos Beam Gen 2 in the studio together with the Sonos Sub Mini. And if I had to compare between the two, I would say that you will find a massive difference in bass level when you pair it with the Sonos Ray compared to the Sonos Beam Gen 2. And this is because that the Sonos Beam Gen 2 has already some decent level of bass. But yes, you can tell a difference when you add the Sonos Sub Mini. However, if you're planning to pair this with the Sonos Arc, it would be better for a smaller size room, so the difference will be even more minor. And here's where I would recommend for you all to go with the Sonos Sub Gen 3 instead, especially if you have a slightly bigger size living room. Now, in terms of music, as usual, I tested it with my regular playlist of test tracks covering a multitude of genres, and feel free to check out my music sound test playlist in the description below. Now, regardless the genre, I noticed a punchier and a richer bottom end, and what I really like is there was minimal to almost no floor vibration. And while this may not be the best way to tell or even feel the overall sound, but here is a sound test with and without the Sonos Sub Mini paired together with the Sonos Beam Gen 2 for movies, so grab your earbuds or headphones for a better listening experience.
Miss, did you take Duke's gun? Oh, Lord help us. Helen! Miss, did you take Duke's gun?
Now, speaking of subs and reviewing subs, a subscription to the channel would be very nice too, and a thumbs up would be extra sweet as well, and thank you very much in advance. So with all of this being mentioned, after using the Sonos Sub Mini for a month, if you're wondering whether or not you should get the Sonos Sub Mini and if you would feel the difference, then yes, I would say yes. Because in my opinion, the Sonos Sub Mini will be a welcome addition to those who own existing Sonos soundbars or speaker like the Sonos ones, to add the extra oomph in the overall sound from a low-end perspective. And with a price of 2,999 ringgit, which I'll leave a link to TC Acoustics website down below for you guys to get it at the latest offered pricing. While it's not cheap for sure, but you'll be paying for Sonos' signature design, the overall great build quality, sound engineering, fantastic user experience, and of course to build a Sonos ecosystem even further. But for those of you who want an even bigger sound, then the Sonos Sub Gen 3 is the way to go. But for most people, especially if you're living in a smaller space and want to really maximize the sound, then the Sonos Sub Mini would be just fine. And speaking of the Sonos Ray earlier, do check out my review of that over here.